Thank you for being here today. We're so happy to have Maida Withers with us this week in the BYU Department of Dance, and felt that her work was especially fitting for the Kennedy Center lecture series on preserving and transforming culture this semester. And we thank Quinn for connecting the Department of Dance and the Kennedy Center. Maida Rust was born in Kanab, Utah. She was raised in Salem and graduated from high school there. She earned a graduate degree an undergraduate degree actually in dance here at Brigham Young University. She was part of the first graduating class with a dance degree in 1958. She was one of 7 students that helped spearhead this program. We're so grateful for her and her legacy here. She earned a graduate degree in dance from the University of Utah, and then she taught for a year at Ricks College, what was then Ricks College. At that time, she met her soon-to-be husband, Arlen Withers. They raised 4 children in Arlington, Virginia, where Maida has been a professor of dance at George Washington University for over 50 years. She is a bedrock of the dance community in the DC area. She began Maida Withers Dance Construction Company in 1974. Shaped by the postmodern movement, her work is characterized by a commitment to experimentation and interdisciplinary collaboration that tackles big issues: political, environmental, interpersonal. She has created works in 13 countries, although she's visited a lot more than that with her company, often working with dancers from that country. Of those countries, she has worked most consistently, it seems to me, with artists from Russia and Ukraine, and Brazil. She has a deep love for the cultures and people of these countries. Her choreography is presented on stage and in other environments: parks, on city streets, museums, on DC monuments, cemeteries, sand dunes. The environments go on and on. I was interested to learn this week that her first BYU residency happened in 1974. She did 2 projects while she was here. One of them took place in the women's gymnasium, and audience members could watch various stations of dance happening. But to move from station to station, audience members had to raise their hand and be lifted and carried by 2 of the dancers from station to station. And the other project she did took place just on BYU sidewalks and walkways here, and dancers were moving around on various kinds of items with wheels: bikes, scooters, roller skates, and it had to be viewed from the tower. We were figuring out maybe the original tower of the JFSB or the JSB or something, so viewing it from above. And in that spirit, like Quinn mentioned, we are doing another project with 12 students that will be performed this Friday at the MOA at 5 p.m. Maida is a choreographer, a performer, filmmaker, director, producer, recipient of numerous awards, and most recently a retrospective of her entire career was featured at the Corcoran Museum in Washington, D.C. And we're happy, grateful to have Maida Withers here with us today.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Is this live? It sounds like it. So, thank you. It was very tender for me to come back to Provo. And when I walked into the guest house, I had to cry quite a bit, imagining how long ago that was, and who I was then, and who BYU was then, and to see that this dance program is the biggest and largest and most successful dance program in America. So it's a long way home. But today I've written a script, and I like to talk a lot. And so I write this script so that I get to the point. So unfortunately, I'm going to stay on the script because I like to tell stories. They're more interesting than maybe these ideas. But I appreciate this topic, and I look forward to talking with you to ask questions. The things selected that you're going to see are not necessarily my favorite works, but I selected works that I thought one had a relationship to the international, your sponsorship, because there is a lot of politics anytime you go into Mexico and you're touring in Mexico and you're having conversations with audiences and so forth. So the works were selected sort of for this presentation. And so I enjoyed that. One thing, too, to warn you is that when I got my first camera, it was from the DC government to test the camera in the dance class. What do you do with the camera? Nobody had television cameras. Nobody didn't know what white balance was. No one knew what any of that was. 1-inch Ampex. So as this 50 years of showing you some excerpts from things, it's just me and the technology a lot of times. So it's a rough shot. It's a rough shot. But for example, I make interesting films, but I'm not showing you any films today. I chose subjects that I thought might be appropriate for this particular lecture. So, and there's some things that I love that I'm not going to show you because we don't have time. But anyway, so let's begin, and I'm going to try and follow the script so that I get my point to you. So, okay. As the youngest of 8 children in the Woodruff and Isabel Rust family, I was born in Kanab, Utah, and raised in Salem, and I love both those places, dearly love them. I lived a spirited life. It was without wealth, and it was without power. I was very lucky that I had to just be alive. A life of freedom that stimulated an abundance of independence, freedom of thought, and daring. So that's who I like to characterize myself. I'm a kid from Kanab. As a very young child in Kanab, I ran fast in the red-hot earth, and I was in my bare feet. I loved that. And I attempted to climb that spectacular, what we call the Indian Dance Hall Butte. At age 5, I followed my brother, Bill. His daughter is here today, a professor at BYU. And my brother Val, who was a professor at UCLA. I followed them. I was 5, and they would throw rocks at me to stop following them. I watched in awe the great American bald and golden eagles that circled overhead in Kanab, not knowing at a young age what I would come to know when I did a 6-year Utah project, that the great myths and powers of the eagles themselves. If you know the eagle, you can send and receive messages to and from the gods. Sitting on the wooden fence above the pasture that also served as the community sledding hill, I pondered, waiting and imagining the sun turning to darkness and the moon to blood. A lot of information for a child at age 5. I never recovered from this innocent sense of wonder. Instead, I sustained it through my life as a professor and my family life and my work as an artist, making work. You know that my study at BYU is very important for me. When I was at Spanish Fork and I was the head of the, now see, I'm telling you a story now. The Athletic Association, I was the president of that my junior and senior year. And I would come to BYU and dance with orchestras. Then I'd get those people to come to Spanish Fork, and we would choreograph a concert, and we presented our concert when we were a junior in high school and a senior in high school. So I knew BYU before I even came here to go to school. So anyway, my 4 years at BYU were very important. My class was 7. We were strong. 2 Californians that came from horse families. And we were determined to get a degree in dance when we were here, and we did it. Dance had to fight its way in to physical education. Good place to be. Unfortunately, we never did get any money from the sports part of athletics, but the housing was appropriate. We could only rehearse from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. because the gymnasium of women was busy after that. So we did weekends as well. It was pretty good. And if you didn't come to rehearsal on time, you had to bring breakfast for everybody. 6 a.m. Very significant at BYU is the opportunity for me to meet two professional people, Eric Hawkins and a woman by the name of Anna Halpern, who became the sort of grandmother for postmodernism in dance in San Francisco, and I was able to study with her and many things. They were distinguished thinkers and practitioners, important figures and friends in the emerging world of postmodern dance. While my generation, we stood in awe of them, on the other hand, we really were looking for something. They were the older generation, like I am now, and we were looking for something else. So we pushed further to a redefinition of dance the best we could, liberating, creating, and searching for freedom. Dancing and making dances from my lifetime began at BYU. Thank you, BYU. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't gotten that dance program, but it happened. So I appreciate the opportunity to address BYU on this subject. And Marin said to me when this came up, she said, "Oh, with your archive, you're perfect for this topic." And I indeed think I am, preserving and transforming culture. This is a painting done by one of the founders of the company named John Bailey. If you've ever been in Washington and seen the Marilyn Monroe painting on the big side of a building on Connecticut Avenue, that's John. He's the person. He's on here. He's down on the bottom there. This hangs in my home. It's a beautiful piece. I would like to introduce you to the Maida Withers Dance Construction Company. That's what you're going to see on the screen. It's a not-for-profit cultural organization, tax-exempt organization. You know the cultural tax-exempt organizations were late coming. It was in the 70s when they became existent. So we were one of the early companies to get a tax-exempt status, which we still have. There were 5 dancers. 2 of these dancers were actually visual artists, one of them being John, and they were practicing visual artists, and a sound sculptor who still exists, lives in Denver now from Brooklyn, and he was part of that genre of in John Cage introduction of electronic music. Believe me, electronic music. Okay. From the beginning, there was a significant influence of multicultural, multidimensional diversity of collaborators. And that's something that I have always loved. I like different artists, dancers, and scientists as well. So you'll see that in my work. And I selected works that I felt had a pretty good base of interdisciplinary new existence as artists, a new expression of being human beings is what we were looking for. Now and new, we felt we were part of something, and we thought something was happening, and we were glad to be part of it. We were ambitious, and we tested audiences with a lot of failures and a lot of successes, too. We were trying to establish a template for behavior. What can we do that is going to be accepted, but actually has validity as an art, because art can get it's a pretty high standard. So for me, dancing in a cemetery, I know the Washington Post liked it. They put a full page of us dancing in the cemetery. That was of interest, but that was way back. That was in the 70s, 1970s. So we were innocent, but we were determined, taking ourselves as serious as possible in this sort of giddy moment. We were giddy. I'm grateful that my lifetime and the time of pioneering happened together. I was born to my time. I was telling students in the class this morning, you're born to your time if you can make it. You have to stay the course on where you want to go and what you want to do. We have a new day is born. And for artists, it means a lot of change for dance, a lot of change for everyone. And so I guess my generation is ending. That generation is taking off, and I think we're going to see amazing, amazing things. Regarding preservation, with the advent of personal computers, you all remember that. I have a son who is the first generation of computer people in the universities, so it's not too long ago. I began assembling and digitizing the information that I was collecting from my choreography, from my performances, for everything I was doing. I personally started digitizing it. And I have created my own archive. If you go to maidadance.com, the descriptions of the work, the bios of all the artists and everything, I did it. I like doing it. And, but it's one of the earliest personal archives done by the artists themselves. So it's pretty interesting if you want to go there. I didn't prioritize any works. I just put them under films, under improvisations, under yeah. So it's the bad and the good are all sort of sharing the bed. So anyway, the timeline and archives it presents a comprehensive history that highlights descriptions of my work. It tells about the dancers. It tells about the everything is there on that page. So the scientists, I work with these people: poets, writers, 3D computer animators, visual artists, filmmakers, scientists, and technologists. They're all there. And sometimes people say to me, "Well, is this your work?" And I said, "Well, I'm the initiator of the projects. But then I'm open to, I have to learn a lot. When you start to make a dance about the auroras, I didn't know the auroras came from the sun. But then when I knew what I didn't know, I went to Finland and Norway and Alaska to learn what I needed to know. So I'm grateful for my life, okay? Now, regarding, in reflection, this is what I think is important about me. What is the question I'm asking? When I go to make a work, what is the question? Does this have value to anybody else? Could it have value to anybody else? What process would help me investigate to make this work? What do I need to do in order to be able to accomplish that? And what role could others play in helping me do that? And what is the result or outcome of the art itself? Will it have meaning to anybody else? Now, today, the big thing is community, community, community. And I was not necessarily that person. I was making these big projects. I wasn't building a community that we do now in the arts. We build communities. We involve people in making their lives different because of the arts. That's really what's happening now, and I respect that. It was not necessarily what was happening in my generation, is that the artist as a community. So anyway, this extensive body of work for stage and film and site locations includes extreme environments that are not typical and special relationships to museums. And I'm going to cover both those things today a little bit. Anyway, I'm honored to share with you some work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk while you watch some video. And here we go. So the first area I'm going to deal with is what is it to make a work for a site? And what is a site? A site is any place, right? The stage is a site. We did a project in the Kennedy Center, we danced in the restrooms. So the sites can be many things. So I support the notion that the world is a stage, and any part of it could be a stage for dance. Site work is an ongoing interest of mine. I love it. We're performing in the museum this Friday. Why not? It's open space. It's beautiful. It has acoustics. People love going there. So in Washington, D.C., it's noted for a lot of amazing monuments to extraordinary, mostly men, and memorials to accomplishments. A lot of political wars and other things, Second World War memorial, etc. And so D.C. has been a fertile ground for me because it has sites that are public, so you get access to them because you're a public, and your taxpaying supports those sites. So I feel very lucky to be able to be in a place where I could have a flush of memories and passions and meaning that is celebrated by the whole nation. So I've loved that. So we're going to see something here. Okay. So this is 50 years of looking back, right? And we'll start in the early days. In the early days, rehearsed and performed in an abandoned dental office, home of Washington Project for the Arts, the first interdisciplinary arts organization funded by who? The newly formed National Endowment for the Arts in the 70s. This early work became White Mansions, a performance in Holyrood Cemetery at dusk that tells a story of life and continuity in death. A piece of white silk served as a connector as it became a wedding veil, a tablecloth for celebration, a wrap for death. Several young dancers were in the cemetery carrying flowers at the same time, playing in white clothes, as if they lived there. The cast departed the cemetery in a gold Rolls Royce of the first gentleman in Washington, D.C. to die of AIDS, by the way, leaving the audience in the dark among the tombstones. So that's the first site work, and that's the one that got a full page of a photograph in the Washington Post. That was nice. Now we go to the Iwo Jima Monument. We recognize the sacredness of the National Iwo Jima Marine Corps War Memorial as we joined in humble support of the dedication, optimism, and bravery of Marines who have given their lives in defense of the United States since 1775. Actually, I put this in here because I think we shouldn't have done this, but we did, and we got a permit. But a policeman came by from Route 50 because everybody was calling and saying, there's people desecrating the memorial. And he happened to be a Mormon, and he happened to know me, and he gave us 10 minutes to get out of there. But so I think we were inappropriate to do what we did. So that's the thing with site. You have to be careful. Sunday Maneuvers. Sunday Maneuvers is an environmental political site event at the Theodore Roosevelt Island National Park. Some of you have been there, I'm sure. Aspects of President Roosevelt's life and government policies became the subjects for the performance. He was an outdoors man, a soldier, speak softly, carry a big stick, love of nature, war, national parks and forests, and he actually was the president that made the Grand Canyon National Park. Dancers' movements were often cued by the sound of airplanes overhead departing and arriving from the National Airport. So there's always so many layers. This is a music. One thing about music, when I was at BYU, Jerry Glover was a professor here, and she was also a musician, played concert music and composed music. And she arranged for the student symphony orchestra to play live in our concerts. So you had to do a choreography that included music they could play or not. And so I started to compose my own music. So I did one piece where I just did it on the piano, key by key, and then it was played by a French horn. I had it on a 5-inch disc was how we performed it. Why I didn't have him play live, I can't imagine now, all the times. But since then, music is always composed or planned for everything I do and played live. Never happens. No other company, I don't think anyone but Maida has got the, I love live music. Okay, so where are we? We're to, I think we'll move to Wet and Wonderful. We're ready to go on to Wet and Wonderful. Wet and Wonderful in Washington, D.C. was an urban dance and water sculpture site. It was in Western Plaza on Pennsylvania Avenue between the White House and the United States Capitol. Nearby, National Theater was under construction, covered with sheets of plastic, so of course we incorporated plastic into our work. For 15 days, from 9 in the morning till noon, 11 dancers rehearsed on site. Each day was a public performance for tourists and office workers looking out of the windows. The wind changed direction daily, so the choreography changed direction too. Cars on the street provided the sound score along with cellist Rogelio Maxwell. Pennsylvania Avenue, you know, is the route the soon-to-be president takes to the Capitol on Inauguration Day. So that's a central place in Washington, D.C. If you go to Washington, D.C. and you have to go to the Capitol, you went on Pennsylvania Avenue. So, okay, now we're going to go to a place called Kyiv in Ukraine. 60 Moves with Future Gaze. Okay, this is in 2018. I've been in Kyiv twice since then doing works with these 18 dancers. We were commissioned, myself and Anton, who's a very famous person in Ukraine, co-choreographers with 18 Ukraine dancers, exploring the relationship between architecture, the dominance of Russian architecture in Kyiv, and the human body in order to better understand how architecture affects our identity and patterns of behavior. The Ukrainians are surrounded by Soviet-era architecture. Their lives are constantly reminded that Russia's been here. So it's not as simple as we may think. What do we feel today, they say, being surrounded by the ideology of the past, a past deeply embodied in Stalinist architecture? And who are we, Ukrainians said, the people who have lived in times of dramatic change, who are still in the process of self-identification, the passionate and innovative spirit of youth. Live music by Steve Hilmy. That was written in 2018. That's from my journals. So this work had gone on for 45 minutes inside 180 buildings with architecture from Russia is on that site, plus a forest. And this was a political event. People were there to celebrate the 60th anniversary of this site. And they asked, we got a commission actually to make this work. So that was nice. So let's move on to another topic. This topic is called the environment. You all know about environment. You live in a spectacular environment with beauty, and this campus is so gorgeous. You have plants, you have trees, you have everything in nature surrounds you. It's a pure space, and it provides, I think, it's such a wholesome and cleaning sort of, I just think it's spectacular. If you live in an urban place and then you see this beautiful temple here. Okay, so let's move on to the environment. A lot of films are made in environments. All film sort of is made in environments, home environments, site environments. So the films I've made, it's easy for that to be an environment, right? We acknowledge that. But to have live performance, that's something else. So anyway, my grandparents, William and Sarah Rust, and my father, Woodruff Rust, they were responsible for building a beautiful thing called the VT Ranch, which is now called the Kanab Lodge and has its fifth owner. It's 18 miles from the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The original building is still there. The places for the tourists to stay is not. But 93 years ago, imagine it, no electricity, no running water, and my family, my sister is here now, they were born there. And I was not born there because they sold it in 1936, and I was born then. So I was not born there at the lodge. But when you go to the North Rim, you pass it. And that was built by this wonderful grandfather and grandmother by hand. They cut down things, whatever. You know what happened. The beautiful lodge continues today, and I hope that you'll remember when you go there that this was made by these Mormon adventurers that thought they could do it because they wanted to, and they knew that something would help them do it. And so it's amazing to me. I'm grateful for their example to me that I have this spirit that they had, this love of the earth. And I think my grandfather was actually an environmental tourist. The tourism is environmentalist. I think he was that before his time. He believed that the canyon was sacred, and that people could come there for reasons other than entertainment and just, whatever. And so I'm very appreciative of that example. Research on environment issues and natural phenomena has resulted in elaborate and diverse dances referring to nature and to the environment. I've done a lot of works based on that. And every time I come to Utah, I have to cry for 2 or 3 days when I look at how I sat on my porch in Salem and watched the storms move around the valley and the Timpanogos Mountain, and Easter, hiking the mountains for Easter, the bag of candy over our shoulders and so forth. I think I was just born in Utah, and it made it easy to do environmental work. We lived in a kingdom of great beauty. So I made a thing called Dance for the Earth, several dances, and I did this because I was going to go to the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. I went there with my company, but I was part of a group called 100 Artists for Ecology, and they came from all over the world, Japan, China, and other places. And we were there for 6 weeks, performing and working in the public schools with environmental ideas with the children in the schools in Brasilia for 2.5, 3 weeks, every day doing demonstrations that's where the Congress is, in Brasilia. And then we were in Rio de Janeiro for 2.5 weeks. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. I took my company, and then I always invite dancers from the country, and we had Brazilian dancers join us. We discovered that the best time to rehearse was at 11 o'clock at night. Everybody showed up. Night was their lifetime, so we rehearsed from 11 to 1. for these works. And so that was fun. Anyway, Rolling Thunder, Messenger Eagle, Dance for the Earth, those were some of the titles. They were created for the summit. Brazilian dancers joined in my choreographies to perform on the beach stage and performances on Sugarloaf Mountain, the sacred mountain, and the commission to create a new site work in the rock garden of the famous Musée d'Art Moderne. And it was a work where 4 dancers, just wearing flesh-colored leotards, the rocks in the garden were like this and this, and they went on for 1 full block. We wet them. I put lights down in between the rocks so that when they climbed, and for 1 hour, we just crawled along the rocks that slowly until we got to the point that we stood up at the end. We had a person from Japan playing the didgeridoo, etc. So the rock person carving one-line art is very famous for that. The Rio de Janeiro gave him a rock to carve, and it was being carved while we were moving through the rock garden. So that was pretty exotic. Ancient lands, ancient people. This is me, and I'm in Korea. And this is a site of the most famous person in modern dance. And this is at her home site in the mountains, an hour from the capital there. And when I toured this in China and Korea and Malaysia, they all thought I was a shaman. This is a woman, and I spent one day with the shaman. The publisher of the dance magazine there invited me to go, and the shaman was there healing the house that was full with 2 terrible cases of cancer. And so I spent the day there, but very interesting. This, by the way, is the favorite thing of me. If I were to show you one dance that I love dancing the most, it was this. And at the end of this, it started to rain, and the rain made the red mud, and I got to roll around in the red mud, and my white gown, but I was singing like that while I was doing that. So anyway, this is Ancient Lands and Ancient People, and a lot of that work came from my residency in Utah for the 6 years. I'd come every year, and I'd improvise in the canyons and on the cliffs and so forth, and a lot of these dances actually came out of my experience in the lands in the Four Corners area in Arizona and so forth. Okay, so the Utah project, that was a 6-year project, and I decided I thought I had to stop dancing because it was just not worth it. So my friend said, well, why don't you go back to Utah and then just recover and see if that's okay. So I started coming here with Belle Clough, and we'd go out every year 2 or 3 times for 2 or 3 weeks, sleep in sleeping bags on the land, sometimes behind houses being built that didn't have occupants yet. And one day we had to go in to have a shower. We went into Kanab, and Thelma and Louise was playing. We didn't know what it was. And at 10 o'clock at night, we were watching ourselves be Thelma and Louise. We didn't know the movie. But anyway, so a lot of things came out of that 6 years project, and that is one of the results. My dancing as a female, I did that on the rocks. We have a lot of footage of that residencies for 6 years, but I didn't have them accessible to me as easily, so I'm not showing you any of that today. So this is an entry from my journal. In 1988, I returned to the land of my birth in Utah with a group of 5 artists for a 5-week experiment of living and dancing on selected land sites to create a dance video. The lands in Utah were sacred to me and to my family history relating to that region since the late 1800s. I was drawn to the strong presence and spirit of the ancient and present indigenous peoples as well. As dancers, we rehearsed in the recreation hall of the Mormon Church on occasion, but generally spent most of our time at 4 specific land sites located. This was an ambitious project. Each day we understood better how to join with the forces of nature as we danced and filmed on the red rocks and cliffs. We experienced the extraordinary physical and spiritual powers of this place and its inhabitants, and we glimpsed our most inward selves. Slowly, I began to make linkages between my concern with new art, my own culture, and these ancient sites and people. The connections involve the relationship of nature and culture, and more importantly, raise questions relating to the very meaning and function of art. There's a great gallery wall in Utah. Do you know it? You hike in 2.5 hours, and it's the most spectacular artwork you will ever see. These images are born out of those images on the Great Gallery wall. This is water, and the people in blue they were water. There's a great figure there that has a clenched fist like this and one hand open like that, and it looks like the black cartoon figure. So these are spectacular. If you haven't been there, it's a great 2.5-hour walk. It's in southern Utah. Go there. So this was done. I'll tell you about this. Utah Spirit Place, Spirit Planet, Tukunikiwats. That's a mountain in southern Utah. The legend is that at the end of day, the people will rise and gather at Tukunikiwats. It's a beautiful mountain. I discovered it when I went to a restaurant, and I said, "What is that on the map?" They said, "That's the mountain right over there. That's Tukunikiwats." So it's a spectacular place. So I did this multimedia project resulting from my research. It was commissioned, this work, by Lincoln Center. I got a grant from Lincoln Center, and for Lincoln Center out of doors in the great dance in the band shell in New York City. National collaborators included Brent Michael Davids. If you've ever seen a lot of Native American films, he provides the music, creates and writes the music for a lot of those films. He's a Mohican composer. Will Goins-Moreau, Cherokee singer. He performed live and sang. This is some of the site work where we're dancing on the site. That was a long way down if you made a mistake. A Bruce Hucko photographer, if any of you know Bruce Hucko, is a brilliant educator in southern Utah, and he's published 3 books on land photography. It's spectacular, and he was helpful to us in locating sites. Joe Paychak, our guide, and so many others. Sonny and Hardy Red let us live in their home for the 6 weeks in the summer. They let us drive their 15-passenger van to do projects every day, rising with the sun and setting with the sun, and sleeping on the earth mostly. 2,500 people saw this performance, one performance, out of doors on a stage that had a 60-foot bandshell, a projection of film, photographs of Bruce Hucko. And then down where you saw those images in the background, they were on 6 18-foot high buttes that were on wheels. So the buttes would be moved by the dancers, and the images would fall off the moving buttes and so forth. So anyway, that is Utah Spirit Place, Spirit Planet. The Deseret News did send a writer out and saw the work and wrote about it. So some of you read about it in your newspaper here. Okay, so environment. Let's do one more thing. I'm going to read to you so it's accurate. In 2008, I began the Farewell Project, a series of 6 dances addressing my sense of despair related to the environment and human choices. Farewell Parched Earth, Remembrances for Tomorrow, was a project in Kenya, Africa, created with 6 male and 3 female Kenyan dancers. They were Maasai. In a 3-week residency at the Go Down Center for the Arts, myself and an African-American dancer, former student of mine, and Steve Helmy, composer, were in Nairobi as cultural envoys for the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Embassy there in Africa. Just 3 weeks following the brutal civil uprising in Kenya that had caused intense personal trauma for our Kenyan dancers, in Parched Earth, we collaborated to reveal the deep hurt as well as the deep understanding of the earth and nature by the African people, and to further understand violence through the current human disruption of cherished values in Kenya. They were killing people with bows and arrows and with rocks, and rocks were sitting in the road to stop traffic from going anyplace. It was traumatic. And these dancers, about 2 months ago, I got an email from one of them saying, "Maida, what are you doing?" And so it was extraordinary. There were other farewell projects. One of them is called Farewell, the Others, the Uncertain World. Tipping Point, about the ice calving in Alaska and other Arctic places. Farewell and Hello, that was by the poet Alex Calgero from here in Orem, brilliant world-class poet and performance poet. Farewell to the End of the World as We Know It, or Dancing Your Way to Paradise. So that's a solo I did with a projection scenario. The last was Farewell, the Rising Tide, the rising of our seas and our oceans. So that's an example of some of the environment work that I've done and love doing. Okay, the next thing is my work with what I call interactive technology. That means when I do something, it makes something else happen. So if I'm involved with technology, I'm interacting with the technology in a way that results in something other than just turning on the recording or something else, that kind of technology. But interactive technology means there's something happening between you, and that's where you're heading. That's where the dancers of this generation are heading, because it's all going to be possible to do many, many things with technology. So I'm going to show you a thing called laser dance, which is a 4-part work, and you're only seeing a small section of part 1, which was departing wherever you are to go live someplace else because we've destroyed the place we are. So we have to find someplace else to go in order to survive, right? So this is a laser installation. These are laser beams that originated on stage, and they hit mirrors and went to another mirror and to another mirror and to another mirror, out over the audience as well as on stage. So this is an argon laser. My first work was with Rockne Kreb, who's the first artist to ever use laser as art. Laser became a thing in the 60s, and his first work was 1968. Our first collaboration was 1971 with laser. So the music for this that you're listening to is by Bob Boylan. Anybody that listens to NPR knows the tiny desk person. That's Bob Boylan, and that's his music on a synclavier instrument. He retired 10 days ago from NPR, so you're not going to hear Bob Boylan anymore. Dancers wore protective goggles. We had to have clothes down on our arms and our legs so that in case any laser went crazy. The EPA, Environment Protection Agency, had a representative there the 8 hours before the opening to make sure the audience was not vulnerable to laser, because the laser beams are going out in the audience and hitting mirrors. So anyway, laser dance is one of several works that reveal my curiosity about the women and the men on planet Earth and ideas related to the universe and possible other worlds. Laser dance, quote, a bold, imaginative space-age enterprise. Alan Kriegsman, Pulitzer Prize critic, Washington Post. So this was done, I think, 1960, let me see. Oh, I don't remember the year. 85. 1985 was when this work occurred. Okay, another interactive technology. We just ran into the laser beam, and it would shift the design of the beam out over the audience, and we shift into another one, and it would shift the design. So that's interactive, that interactive technology. Dancers have to be so patient, right? So this is another project. This is a long project. They don't happen in 3 months. They happen over a period of years, sometimes 5. So Dance of the Auroras, Fire in the Sky, has resulted in 2 projects, a documentary film on how it was done, and that had me in a car starting in Finland, going up to the top of the world, coming down the coastline of Norway, working with the scientists in the Tromsø, where a lot of research is done in Norway. The first place to view the aurora was in Norway. The first Svalbard is the island that does only auroral research. That's off the coast of Norway. So anyway, the performance in 4 parts included the sun, virtual sun. That's because that's where the aurora comes from, the burst of the sun. You can see it on your online. NASA is now online with all of that. Solar wind is where what's carried from the sun into the universe, and that some of that comes toward the Earth. When it hits the Earth, that's part 3, magnetic storms seen from above the Earth, the airplanes that the NASA sends around the planet every day to see what's happening with the aurora from above the aurora instead of in the Earth below the aurora. And the last section was the aurora from the planet Earth view. So that. I have in my hand a wireless mouse. Wireless mouse was invented very late. As soon as it was invented, Tanya Frogger from Brazil said, we have to use it. What's on the backdrop there is manipulated by this wireless mouse. So when you saw me dancing and you saw these things, they're manipulated by someone moving the mouse. When the mouse moves, it's like looking at your computer and manipulating it with the wireless mouse. So that in the computer is this 3D visual art, and it gets manipulated by somebody on stage with the wireless mouse. Good luck. So, when I was in Norway, I just always ask questions, and then I can get answers and get help. And I asked if I had a CD of people doing music about the aurora. So I asked the producer of the CD, is there one of those composers and musicians that is really committed to the environment and to the planet Earth? And he said, oh, Øystein Sivag. Wouldn't take money from the cigarette companies. Wouldn't take me, this is Øystein. So Øystein came from Norway to play music and is spectacular pianist and vocalist, and 6 of them. And quite amazing. So I initially thought I would build the work on dancers who lived with the aurora, but I couldn't get any funding in Finland because they're not so rich. Everybody said, go to Norway. Norway has the money because of oil. So anyway, I ended up doing it otherwise. There's one Russian dancer in that work, and there's one dancer from Poland. Okay, that work was also done at the Air and Space Museum, the Albert Einstein Planetarium. The audience came, and then the musicians played there, and then we danced with them in the auditorium. So that's Washington, D.C. That's the benefit of Washington, D.C. So the next thing is more difficult to comprehend. It's called mind fluctuations. Let me see. I have to make sure. Oh, I think I'm lost a little bit here, maybe. Okay. So we have mind fluctuations. A 90-minute interactive collaboration between dance, neuroscience, 3D projected computer art, and live electronic music. It continues my fascination with the connection of the human body and the mind to interactive technology. So this is not the helmet. Is it possible for you to go back to the beginning of this so I can, and if you want to stall it for just a second, can you stall it when you've got a close-up of me? There. Do you see I'm wearing a helmet? It's called the emotive helmet, and it has little feet that go on the skull. 2 are very important right here and right here. That one dancer wears that helmet, and that helmet transmits the waves coming out of the head into a dongle. The dongle goes into the computer. The computer has this art in it, made by Tanya Frogger, and this manipulates the object. So when you see that thing moving, that my helmet on my head is moving that visual image. Okay? That is a sculpture piece that actually was built by an artist in Washington, D.C. Each one of these things has a story. This is about man and power. And this particular image is actually from a parking garage. It's taking the wheels of a car and turning it into art. But anyway, he was not wearing the emotive helmet. Someone in the wings was wearing the emotive helmet. So that was the only time that. Okay, you can see that my work is not necessarily compatible with the board of directors to present a season of 3 concerts. It's not going to happen quite like that. So it's actually sometimes a miracle. I think it's mostly a miracle. Anyway, I'm going to take you now into something political. If you live in Washington, D.C., you are political. You support the capital of the world. And everybody you know in your neighborhood probably has worked for the government or will work for the government or whatever, or is internationally there because of the government. So that's the town. That's our capital. So I had this, when I was going to Finland to see if I could do Aurora, I went to the embassy and told them that I was in town, and they said, how about you going to the first postmodern conference of modern dance in Russia, in Volgograd. Now, Volgograd is the city where the Russians defeated the Germans in the Second World War. It's a very important city, and that general was killed by the head of Russia within 3 months after that victory. But nevertheless, that's where I learned about Motherland Russia, the woman that has the sword in one hand. The hand is up like this, and the sword is in this hand, and she's the same size as our Statue of Liberty. And she's up on top of a hill, and you want to faint when you see her. All the way up the stairwell to her are mothers and fathers holding their children who've been injured or hurt in war. It's a stunning, stunning place. But I happened to go into Russia at that time because I was on my way to Finland. And then I started going to Russia because I met all these dancers, and I just kept going to Russia. Yeah. Also, my sons ended up living in Russia, and one of them lives in Moscow as we speak. Mark Withers, a twin to Eric, who lives in Florida. Eric was there 23 years, but Mark's there 25 now. So that's became my fascination with Russia, is I feel like I am a grandmother to 2 Russian children. So anyway, this is some of my work in Russia. And this is really touching this section that I'm going to play for you now. Do you know a thing called the Gulag? G-U-L-A-G. It's written, Solzhenitsyn, I believe, was the author that wrote about the Gulag. It's been my great honor to engage in more than a dozen projects in Russia with Russian dancers since 1996. In 2004, I and dancer Anthony Gangor participated as guest artists in an extraordinary 5-week residency in Russia on Solovki Island near the White Sea in the Arctic, the location of one of the first Soviet-era gulags, the deadly forced labor camps that imprisoned millions of political prisoners, ordinary people taken off the street, and criminals. We danced and filmed improvisations daily in various locations on various islands, trying often to be invisible and pretending to be tourists. The first clip is one of the dungeons in the historic 14th century monastery on the island that became the Gulag, where we danced without permission. When priests or tourists came near, the video artist cried, "Red light," that means stop dancing. "Green light," continue. The signal to stop or go. These experiences are part 1 of the Thresholds Crossed work that I'll show you in a minute. So the second thing that you're going to see now is called Gulag Art and Gar, and this is a video film. It's a political documentary dance shot in this unique Soviet-era architectural structure. If you stop the film a minute. Do you see how the windows are slats of wood? That lets the light from outside into the building, and from into the building, whatever can go out. There were 18 of these structures built in Russia. This is a surviving one, and this is still there. This was, they said, where the dirigible, the airship that delivers supplies to the prisoners and workers in the Gulag. And that had become a place for the workshops that were being presented. The court, now this is important, and this is politically sensitive, so this is a woman named Audrey Chen from Baltimore, and she's a vocalist, extreme vocalist. That's what she does. She plays the cello, and she sings like that. And she tours all over Europe and whatever. I performed with her a lot. Anyway, in the dance you're going to see, Thresholds Crossed, part 2 is based on, I thought, well, I can't talk about the Russians' gulag, what has America got that could be similar to that? And so at that same time, guess what was happening? 9/11 World Trade Center was taken down, and people responsible or thought to be responsible were eventually prisoned in the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And so part 2 of this dance, called Thresholds Crossed, about war and the whatever, is really about the Americans, and it's a duet that you'll see in a minute. This is part 1, and this is about the Gulag. These are Russian and American dancers. There's 1 Ukrainian and 4 Russians, and 6 Americans are in this work. It would be impossible to take on a subject like Russia and America, partners. We have a very long-going relationship with them. We've been very good for each other. We needed an enemy. They needed an enemy. We seem to be compatible. We are after something from each other, using each other some way. So I bought a lot of this street art in the subways and other places in Russia on my times in Russia, and this has been built into, these are messages like, don't tell anybody where your son is, and this and that. Okay? So anyway, this is we have to end soon. We have one more thing we have to do. So I think, are we finished with Thresholds Cross? Okay. The museums is the last topic. And I have 2 things to show you about dancing in the museums. So let's start with the National Building Museum, which is a museum for architects and builders, people with hammers and saws and other things. And they asked me to make a work for this every summer they make a large installation, and they asked me to create something for it. How are we doing? You don't have icebergs, glacial drift? Okay. So this is in the National Building Museum. It's your museum. It's part of Smithsonian. And we're dancing in that installation of icebergs. The blue that you saw is the ocean. And we're at the bottom of the ocean, and you can see the icebergs that come down into the ocean. And the audience is sitting in a circle. A lot of times in site work, you put the audience in the location, what's best for that location. And anyway, this is about an underworld of icebergs. And the music is by these 2 people sitting there, John and Steve. And I'm actually doing poetry about in a world, whatever. So anyway, and the last thing I want you to see is this. The exhibition that she was you can play that till it ends. The exhibition that she was talking about, I'm going to share that with you. This is very rare to have an exhibition about dance. Dance is used to draw audiences into the museums. People want to go there because they're going to see dance, they're going to hear music, they're going to see something like that. So, but this is not about that. So this is a timeline. This is my timeline. And actually, we did dancing during this project on the parties. The opening and the gala and the closing, we had live performance happening in the museum. So this is the exhibition. You see, that's the helmet I told you about. That's the helmet you saw. And then we have dancers dancing with projections from the work in the museum itself. And this is me wearing the helmet. That was the mouse that manipulated, like Tanya. That person is the Russian male and the Poland female. Laser dance, you know. This is Stahl, a rotating loudspeaker that was above the dance. There's a very particular thing about this exhibition. That's one of the images from the Great Gallery wall. That's a figure identical to what's on the Great Gallery wall. The pillow dance, you're going to see a pillow this Friday at 5 if you come and see. This is about the violence of love. a piece called Collision Course, aka Pillow Talk. So this is an exhibition in the Corcoran Gallery in Washington, D.C., and there are live performances for the parties, as you can see, where the people come and to have a good time. This is Anton, my friend from Ukraine, and this is Steve, a composer I've worked with for 15 years, and this is John, a sculptor turned electronic composer. Those objects have electronic things put into them, and then they play sound. This is one of the exhibitions, which is just an assemblage of different things from the archive. This is an event I did 14 years, the DC International Improvisation Plus Festival. People came sponsored by their embassies from all around the world, and performed in the museum. This is the script you're going to see on Friday that's going to be done by the BYU students. And it's a poem by Alex Calgero, who's a very famous world-class poet that lives in Orem. And he's performing live on Friday. If you can come, you'll love him. It's spectacular. This is a specific exhibition. I couldn't do an exhibition without making a new work. It wouldn't be right for me not to make a new piece. So this is done with Robin Bell. Some of you may know of him. Have you ever heard or seen the art of a guerrilla projection artist that presented text on Trump Tower? Well, if you've seen that, you've seen my partner on this, Robin Bell, and we just took excerpts of certain things from my archive and created this immersive. So the audience just walks into this large room, and these are projections on the wall, on the ceiling, sometimes on the floor, but these are things from the archive. This red cloth that you can see here is from a piece I did called Dig, which is a portrait of Trump and Putin. The whole dance is about the relationship of Trump and Putin. And I did a whole thing sitting on a bench with this large fabric swallowing up the Russian symbol of the red. We like to do this work here. And what we didn't do in this work is have live dancing, because the audience was inside the project. And we'd like to also have the possibility of live performance happening with this when it goes on. Maybe we can do that maybe at the museum here or something. It would be really exciting to be immersed in dance like that. So this is done with 9 projectors and a video card in with each one of the projectors, so that the information from different can be in more than one projection. So we have to stop. This will be ended in just a minute. So while that's going on, I'm going to say these things. We are now 20 years into our new century. In these deeply confusing times, what is it, or what will be, the contribution of culture? That's the question that Quinn is asking. What is the future of culture in our society today? Will culture be remembered? Will it be honored? This is a conjecture on what is our future with culture. We have a lot of distractions. We have a lot of intense information. There's a lot of conflicting truth and lies. It's a complex time. And so what is the question that we're going to ask today? What's the question about culture? What is the question we're asking about art? How important is it? How much are we going to allow it to influence people's lives? So it will remain in the balance of time to see what's going to happen in terms of culture. So I deeply appreciate the chance to be here and share my work with you, some of my work with you, and I look forward to a chance for us to exchange ideas when I stop talking.